Bigtincan is the world's leading sales learning and enablement platform that delivers the onboarding and training, preparation, coaching, customer engagement, and follow-up and insights that modern businesses need to win.
Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why and how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me these ears. And if you're watching this on video, appreciate your eyeballs as well. Today, I got the Chief Marketing Officer from Bigtincan, Dr. Rusty Bishop. Good morning, Rusty. How you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, Victor?
I'm doing good. You're gonna get me that mellow response. I gave you a great intro right there. The Bigtincan guy.
Yeah, I know. I understand.
But anyway, Rusty.
Yeah.
Hey, Rusty, let these folks know two things. One, a little bit about yourself, and then a little bit about Bigtincan before we jump into some serious content with regard to marketing and a couple other topics we're going to talk about.
You got it. Yeah. So Bigtincan is a sales enablement platform. We're one of the biggest players in the space. We're a publicly traded company on the Australian Stock Exchange, 2,000 plus customers, servicing millions of salespeople with our sales tools across the world. And those tools include things like ways to get your content out to your sales guys out in the field, no matter whether they're sitting behind a desk, top of a computer, or whether they're out there on their iPad, iPhone, meeting with customers out in the field. We also have software for sales coaching, sales training, as well as sales engagement, which is what we're doing right now, meeting online, recording those types of calls, listening in with conversational intelligence. So really the full gamut of all types of sales tools that a salesperson would need to be successful. I'm going to
ask you a tough question.
Yeah.
Before you give me your background, because I want to ask you a tough question on this, because I think it'll be interesting to see how you answer, because you are the Chief Marketing Officer. So I'm sure you have a great answer.
I better.
If someone says to you, Rusty, why is Bigtincan different? Like, why do you guys stand out?
We stand out because we are absolutely obsessed with buying experience. Obsessed. It is literally our vision. It's our mission. And that is actually to create a great buying experience. And not for our buyers, for salespeople's buyers, the people that they're out there meeting with every day. So we're so obsessed with this. And we've figured out different ways to think about sales enablement from your buyer's perspective. And everything that we do, everything that we build, every integration, every tool, every AI that we go out there and pull into our system to help salespeople be better at their jobs is all thought of from that buyer perspective. That's why one of the things I love about your podcast is the why in buying. So I personally believe that buying experience, the experience that you have while buying something, dramatically influences the way that you're going to buy something and whether you're actually going to do it or not. So as a CMO of a company whose job is to help salespeople be better at their jobs, I'm obsessed with helping salespeople create a great buying experience. The whole company is obsessed with that.
I saw it all over your website.
Yeah.
Let me put you on the spot again.
Yeah, of course. Let's go.
Let me put you on the spot again. I said, give me an example. If you go back 10 years ago, you didn't hear the phrase buying experience. No. We're starting to hear that more, obviously, in the last few years. More importantly, as COVID and during COVID and post-COVID. But I wanted to ask you, do you have an example, like, a tangible example, so my listeners and viewers can go, I get what this company does. An example of how you went in there, helped a company improve, work with their frontline salespeople, improve the buying experiences of their customers, and just give me an example of that so people can really grab on to what Bigtincan is.
Yeah, so let's take a classic example. One of the largest alcoholic beverage distributors in the world, I can't name their name, but you can guess who they are, owned by a company out of Sweden and founded in St. Louis, Missouri, has, imagine this, tens of thousands of people out there selling their products, right? They don't even work for them most of the time. They work for individual alcohol distributors. So imagine if you are this mega giant company and you need to figure out how to help all these people who don't actually work for you sell your products. So what Bigtincan could go in and help that company do is make sure that everybody out there selling those products, no matter how they're changing over time, whether they're specials, whether there's new things, there's new offers, to get that information, access it very easily on any device in the entire world that they use every day, so that they don't have to necessarily ever talk to the people at the parent company. So tens of thousands of salespeople having the content that they need at the point of sale at all times, and something that's easily searchable. So they don't even know the products that well in so many cases. They walk into a grocery store and the guy says, how can you sell me this thing? And he says, I can do it like this, right here. There it is. There's the answer. So they don't have to go back and send hundreds of emails in to their managers and their managers, and even to another company who they're selling their products through. It's right there on the phone. So there's extremely tangible example.
By the way, I feel that one.
Right?
I feel that one.
And I look, I've carried a bag, right? I've done sales, and I get the frustration, right? I've been there in that moment where the conversation flips, where you're not audible ready, a term that I think is very interesting, and you have to go back home, find the information, and then go get the next meeting. I think you know this probably better than anybody, Victor. Getting that next meeting, you got about a 50% chance of getting it again, right? So how much time?
That's optimistic. By the way, that's very optimistic of you, Rusty.
So let's say you got a 5% chance of getting the meeting again, right? So if you think about, I know something I'm personally obsessed with and is time and using time wisely. And what a tremendous waste of time that you showed up. You maybe flew there, you spent hours, no telling what that cost you and your company to spend that time, go get that meeting. You couldn't pivot because you couldn't find the information that customer needed. To me, that's a moment that's easily fixed with software. Yeah. Okay, so when we think about sales tools, especially sales enablement, you know, if I'm a seller, that's the value of it to me as a seller, right? It allows me to pivot in the moment, find that thing, that piece of information, that case study, that slide in the deck that you couldn't find in that moment, in that one moment when you got the meeting. And I think that moment is so critical. And now you would ask me about buying experience, right? And to me, that's what's changed. People's expectations now are dramatically different. You can buy a car through a vending machine, okay? So what does that say? Okay, so people expect a great experience. I go to Amazon and buy something, it shows up at my door the next day, okay? I want that experience. If I have to come to you as a seller, it means I can't figure something out on the internet. So I'm expecting that same experience that I get from Amazon when you show up at my door. That's to me what drives sales enablement and why I think sellers should care about it.
I love it. I love it. There was so much what you just said there, man. My brain exploded because you brought back some very bad memories of, as you say, carrying the bag and going back and forth. And, you know, the buyer experience is all about creating that frictionless experience, right? Minimize the friction. But I know that you mentioned you're obsessed with time. And I think it's really important what you said. I just want to recap because what you're saying is, look, if you look at the sales cycle, and you're trying to close a sales cycle or shorten the sales cycle, all this going back and forth, what we used to do, you know, it costs us a lot of time, money, and who knows how many deals, because again, maybe we didn't get the second meeting. Sure. You know, talk to me a little bit about, you know, when you're going to a company and they're focused on what the system's going to cost, what the platform's going to, you know, what's the price, but they don't look at what it's costing them. You know, talk to me about that and how you try to reframe their brain so they really learn that this is about optimizing time, which translates into lower cost, higher revenue.
Yeah, it's a great question, Victor. And I think it's actually the hardest thing for humans to understand is the value of their time. I see so many people who don't think about the value of time. Like I feel like I meet them every day. So that's why I'm so obsessed with it. So coming back to your question, like it's so important to get that right. Okay, so you have to be thinking all the time, I've got to be optimizing my time to go out there every time I meet with a customer. Because how many deals slip, right? And it comes down to that. So when we go into a customer and we're saying, hey, how are you going to get your ROI out of this tool? Right? The first thing we want to ask them is like, what do you want to optimize for? Do you want to optimize for sales velocity? Do you want to move your middle? Do you want to onboard salespeople faster? Are you having a problem with rep attrition? We just went through this cycle of COVID, right, where salespeople attrition rate was something like 60%, maybe 50% during that time. All employees were leaving their jobs like crazy, right? So, you know, we have companies coming to us with lots of different leaky parts of their sales team, right? So think about it like that. So what are you looking to optimize for? So that's the easiest way I think about how you're going to build an ROI for these tools. Let's take a classic example. So let's say you're a company and you've decided you're going to grow through upsell. One of the easiest pathways to growth is to grow your current customers, right? So we go in and we say, look, how do you upsell today? What are your metrics? You know, what is your current velocity in upsell? Most of the time, they don't really even have an upsell plan, which is a little bit scary. But let's say they do have a plan. So we just show them, hey, look, here's how you're going to increase upsell by making sure that every time your sellers are actually meeting with a customer, they have the ability to be Audible ready. I can hear that question, go in, look through a catalog of products, look through a bunch of offerings and PowerPoints or PDFs or videos, or even AR and VR, something we're very focused on here at Bigtincan, is sort of this future of AR and VR. Okay, and now I'm saying, look, I can now upsell you because I listened, I did discovery, you're a customer, And here's this other thing that will help you. So very easy to show ROI on this kind of things, right? Because you get let's say you get a 20% bump in upsell across a large sales team. That translates to millions of dollars.
Rusty, you know why I know I like you? I don't know if you knew this, but I just published a book called Mastering the Upsell in January.
I saw that.
And I realized that, yeah, and most people don't focus on upsell. So I love that. One of the things you said, I don't want the viewers or listener to miss this because I think it's interesting how you reframed it, but I don't know if you meant it on purpose. You didn't use time management.
Yeah.
You kept using optimize time. How do you optimize time? Optimize time.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting phrase that you're using, kind of I don't want to say beating the customer over the head, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Getting them to think about time that way. The other thing I wanted to ask you, just tie in optimizing time to, let's talk about onboarding.
Sure.
It's becoming a big issue, right? As you mentioned, during COVID, people lost 50, 60% of their sales force. They're trying to bring people back in.
Yep.
I mean, I would think that the Bigtincan platform is primed for this type of problem solving in terms of onboarding.
Absolutely. It is one of our biggest selling points. If you think about the compelling moment to buy, as sellers, we're all obsessed with that moment of like, is this buyer in a compelling moment, right? That immediately going back to time, right? Should I waste my time with the seller or spend my time with this buyer, right? Are they in a compelling moment? Onboarding right now is massively compelling, right? So the cost to replace a salesperson is roughly their salary times 1.5. So think about the cost of that to a company. Now think about the time it takes to onboard a seller. So let's say on average it's 7 to 9 months, whatever data set you believe out there in the internet or the people out there doing these kind of surveys. If you could shrink that time to 5 months, right? Just by having a standardized onboarding program that people can take on their own time, that you can actually as a manager log in a dashboard and see like, all right, Victor's completely up to speed. He's done all the onboarding things. He's practiced against the AI. The AI says he's ready to go. Now I go listen to Victor and look, I could certify you to sell in 2 months faster. Now I scale that across 1,000-person sales team. 2 months is a lot of time. Yeah. Okay, so a seller is pretty valuable. Let's say they got $1 million territory, $1 million quota, 2 months. That's roughly a sixth of that. So
number adds up.
Yeah,
I love what I want to highlight to people because I love what you're doing. You're very good at what you do. I can tell already, because it's like you're saying, okay, show them some gain. Here's what you could get, but then you hit them in the gut with the pain piece because we know we're more motivated by pain, right? In other words,
absolutely.
Here's how much you're losing, how many deals you're leaving on the table, so forth and so on. And do you find that? Because you use this phrase, are they in a compelling moment? I got to be honest, I've never heard that phrase before till today.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when, first of all, how do you identify somebody in a compelling moment? And if they're not, how do you use, the pain of not changing to move them into that compelling moment?
Well, let's take the first part of that first. Let's define a compelling moment. So a compelling moment to me, I define that as this particular buyer or this account has had an event that has forced them to just make the decision to change. Okay. Now so for every seller out there can be selling anything, right? From candy to the most complex software in the world to financial services, right? So if I've had a compelling event, let's take a classic one, right? M&A. So 2 companies have joined. Okay. Now there's things they've got to do. So they've had that compelling event. They got to figure out how to join up a sales force, right? They got to figure out how to mesh 2 CRM systems together. They might have to figure out who they're going to get rid of, right? Which is kind of scary, an M&A event. So now this company's had a compelling event. So if your account that you're going after has had a compelling event and you've identified that, now you know that that's someone that you should be spending time with. So that's how I define that. Okay, so now the part of your question was, I think, well, if I come back to it, was how do you know they're in a compelling event and how do you figure that out? Well, I'm in marketing, not in sales, which is probably a little counterintuitive considering the way we've been talking right now. But first thing I would do is
by the way, take a small pause there because I almost see them like there's this blend there now, right?
There is.
Hey, Russ, I'm gonna confess something to you. I rarely do this. I'm gonna confess something to you. I used to laugh at marketing people.
Yeah,
just to laugh like they don't have
a
real job. But in the last 10 years, 15 years, you realize that marketing has become, I think, and I hate to say it sometimes, but I really believe marketing is actually more important than sales. I'm not saying sales is not important. I'm not saying that, but I think marketing has moved into the pole position when it comes to forming the customer's preferences, on the internet when people try to find you. And so I really think they go hand in hand. Would you agree with that? If you want to add something to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, marketing is. Most marketers are now judged on revenue. There's still a handful out that are judged on brand. Me personally,
Great
I'm
point.
judged on how much pipeline and how much revenue I bring into the company. I mean, when I go to the
Yeah.
board, when we go to board meetings, that's what I present. So
You mean
I'm
you don't go, here's my pretty logo, here's what I did
right,
to my logo, here's my pretty
right.
presentation.
There's no more pens and logos in marketing, right? There might be for some companies, but the reality is, it's like marketing is now tied to revenue, just like sales. So
That's funny.
I think, and if you're unfortunately in one of those companies where marketing and sales are siloed, there's still way too many companies where this is true. You're first of all, you're a seller, right? I'm talking to your audience. I think most of them are probably sellers. I think it's probably your job to go figure out what marketing's doing, and sell
I
them
agree.
on your ability to make their number, because marketing has a number now. So I'll come back to that. So coming back to the compelling identification question, which is something, again, I think is very interesting, right? How do you identify that your account has had a compelling moment? So let's say you've defined your compelling moments for your products or your services. You'll have to do that with your team, right? I can't do that for you. Pretty straightforward. So go to your marketing team. Say, do we have any tools to identify whether my accounts have had a compelling moment? There's tools out there like account-based marketing tools like 6sense or Demand-Base, where marketers now are pretty savvy. They can easily detect accounts that are in market. They can detect accounts that have had certain events because they know what they're searching for, right? They know that your accounts are searching for, like, how do I survive an M&A, right? Or how do you merge two sales team after M&A? People type that into their search bars, that whole sentence, because they speak into their phones, right? Okay, so go to your marketing team first. Have any of my target accounts, or if you're an account manager, any of my accounts had any of these compelling events? And I want you to notify me. That's the key piece. Mr. Marketer, Miss Marketer, I want you to notify me. Whether it's email, CRM, chat, Slack, doesn't matter, right? If one of my accounts has that event, I want to know, because what am I going to do? I'm going to refocus. I'm going to go use my time to go after that account that I know has had that compelling moment. That's the first way. Second way I would recommend is use great discovery. Part of what we do here at Bigtincan is sales coaching, sales training, helping people build that out. A lot of times what we see going into the software is how to do great discovery. Here's our company's methodology, right? Whether you're using Victor's methodology, sales influence, whether you're using Force Management, any of those other type companies, great stuff out there to do discovery. You got to ask the question, right? You got to ask a great question. And that great question might be, hey, has this happened recently, right? Have you had a change of, the C-level? Have you had an M&A event? Are you about to have whatever event that's make your compelling thing happen? So that, to me, is pretty straightforward, right? It's talk to marketing, be a great discovery questions. That's it.
So part two of the question was, excuse me. So now that we've defined a compelling event, a trigger moment
Yep.
that leads to a compelling event,
Same thing. Yeah.
And I go back to the pain and gain question
Mm-hmm.
before we get into the M&A, because I definitely want to go deep on the M&A with you.
Oh, I love it.
On the pain and gain, it's like, what do you find works more effectively? And you're probably going to say it's a combo, but based on your presentations, I can give you a compelling vision of the future of where you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
or I can tell you how horrible it's going to be, if you keep doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just give me your sense of that. What do you think customers are responding to? I know it's a broad question, kind of unfair, but
Yeah, it's okay. What are customers responding to? I think now the way, we sell complex products, so let me be clear with that. So, our buyer group might be 12 people. If you're selling to individuals, this might be slightly different. I think people are responding to what I call the one thing. So everybody in that buyer group has one thing that they're concerned about. And so when we're seeing people do successful presentations, those buyers are out there, and they're either, they have a fear, they're scared of something, I don't know, or they want to move up in their career, or they're a CFO, right? I mean, be a part of everybody's buying group, some sort of, procurement, right? And how are they going to notch their career? They're going to get a great deal. And so as a seller, I think it's incumbent on you to understand, or at least try to understand, what the one thing is for everybody in that buying group. And then that's how you tailor your presentation when you go in, right? And so being able to tailor a presentation on the fly is another thing that we do here, help companies with here at Bigtincan. And that is like, literally, you're walking to the door and you get the email sitting in the parking lot, and they say, hey, guess what? Procurement's going to join, right? You grab that one slide out of the Bigtincan library, throw it into your slide, personalize it for the procurement lady who's sitting in there in the meeting with you now. Okay, so that gives you the ability to change that presentation on the fly, no matter where you are, right? Sitting at the bar, in the
by
airport.
the way, I never thought about that, but that is a sweet feature, by the way.
Yeah,
That's pretty nice.
but we've all
Yeah.
been there, right? How many times had walked into the room and you're like, I did not know that person was going to be here. Now you've got this canned presentation, you've been working on it for 6 weeks. Guess what? The CTO showed up. What does he care about? He cares about driving efficiency in software. Oh gosh, what do I got to do now? Right? I flip in a few slides and from your platform like Bigtincan, bam, I can answer that guy's concerns or that gal's concerns.
I love that. Hey, Rusty, I'm gonna put you up. I'm putting you on a spot a lot.
That's all good. Man, I love this.
You could. I feel like you could take it. Tell me what you think about. You talked about, let's say, depending on whose numbers you believe, right? You got 9 buyers involved, 12 buyers now, whatever the number is.
Okay.
How do you, your perspective on trying to build consensus when you got different people going in there for different reasons, different motivations and agendas? What are some of the things maybe you think about when you go in there dealing with different buyers?
I would start with force ranking the buyers. So by that, I mean, let's say there's 5, just for simple math here. There's one person there who has the most influence, right, in that buying group. And let's say you're selling into marketing, because I'm a marketer and that's pretty straightforward, right? You're selling into a marketing team, right? So you're looking at that. Now, I force rank that marketing team as follows, right? The CMO has the budget. So the person I need to convince the most is the CMO. Now, I might not have the ability to get to the CMO. So my next force ranking is who has the CMO's ear? Like, who can influence the most powerful person in the room? And then on and on and on. Now, as I force rank that, it would be 1, the person that's going to write the check, right? 2, the person who's going to convince the person to write the check. And 3, who is the person who's going to torpedo this? Right? Who's sitting over there on the side? Okay, that's how I force rank.
That's such a great little road. That's such a great little roadmap. Who can write the check? Who can talk the guy into writing the check? And who's going to shoot me?
Right? Who's going to torpedo this? So whose career is going to be negatively affected? Right? Who's the person who's looking at your competitor on the side to do something else? Who does the slight thing that he's already almost got a deal done with, or she's almost got a deal with? Right? So now buying center stuff. This has been talked about from the sales world now for quite a while, right? Because it's changing, and that's because of fear, right? Because of this ability to do research and the ability for everyone's getting a little more scared. We're hypothetically entering a recession here. I'm not going to say that it's happened yet. So everyone's starting to say, okay, Nick, how I'm going to protect my job. So that kind of changes that buyer group once again. So force ranking them every time, to me, is really critical. And that's the scientist in me coming out, right? You want to force rank things based on the most important to spend your time there. Like, you're not necessarily always going to get to that buyer. You know this, Victor. I mean, sometimes the buyer is only going to see 2 slides of a PowerPoint deck that the champion brings to them.
Right.
So knowing what that compelling event, and again, is that buyer in a compelling event, or is your champion in a compelling event? Force ranking those through. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. I joke about it, but I really do love the way you put that. It's very simple to kind of memorize. At the end of the month, I'll be interviewing Matt Dixon. Matt Dixon was the co-author of The Challenger Sale.
Love it.
He also started a company called Tether, which is a conversation intelligence platform. And he wrote a book called Jolt, The Jolt Effect, which comes out in September. And I got a sneak peek at it, right? Okay. And one of the things, the data was showing him, and I think I really want your take on this, because I'm sure you're probably seeing the same thing or not, is that one of the big things to get a deal unstuck, out of the indecision mode, was de-risking was the word he used. Is how do you de-risk something for clients? Talk to me about, how do you de-risk? By de-risk, I mean, you give them a way out so they can make a buying decision, especially in your business, because it's a big platform they're buying from you, right? It's a big investment. Absolutely. How do you de-risk a buy?
That's a great question. Putting me on the spot, I have to think about it for a second. But I don't know what data Matt has, but if he has CI, then he's listening in on conversations, right?
Yeah. So I'll give you some examples. One was limiting the length of the contract was de-risking. Putting it in phases. Doing a project in phases and just measuring everything at the end of each phase with no commitment to go to the second phase if the first phase didn't work. And just different strategies like that. I just thought, I had you on here. I just wanted to get your opinion on, or just, your opinion on, if you use any de-risking strategies to make the customer go, all right. Because his whole thing was, they know they have to change. They have a compelling moment and they're urgent about that moment, but then something's holding them back. How do you get people to get unstuck? Maybe that's another way of putting it.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate the clarification. So, I mean, the way to think about it is like this, right? I'm over here and I'm starting to feel this pain, right? But is it great enough to get me over there to make the decision to purchase six-figure software? I think that's what you're asking me, right? So how do I de-risk that? How do we just de-risk that for them? Well, exactly what you just said, right? So what we want to do is we want to show them a crawl, walk, run. So what we try to go into de-risk is we want to say, what is that primary thing that you need to solve from a sales perspective, right? Are your sales cycles too long? Are you not upselling effectively? Are you discounting too much? Do you have an onboarding problem, right? And so you de-risk it by saying, okay, let's fix this problem first, okay? Because you've got it's a problem. You've had enough time to measure it, or we'll help you measure it. So we'll bring a customer success team in and say, look, let's help you measure the problem because we want to define a baseline. So when I think about de-risking, I've got to have a baseline, right? So I need to know what your current sales cycle is or your sales velocity is, right? If I know that, then I can say, all right, here's how we're going to de-risk this. Okay, phase one, we're going to fix this one problem. Here's how we're going to fix it. We're going to bring a team in to help you do it. So one of the things that stops people from buying big software is, how the hell are we going to implement this, right? How are we going to get this thing out into the field? So we're going to de-risk that by saying, we're going to provide you with an expert, and not only an expert, but a vertical expert. So what Bigtincan does a little different, I think, is we actually hired vertical experts to be customer success. So for telecom, we hired a person right out of AT&T, right? And said, you're going to help these telecom companies, right? The big tel, right? Get these things implemented. Their business. So we de-risk it in those ways. We bring in experts in the vertical. We fix a single problem first. Boiling the ocean is one of the worst things you can possibly do with sales enablement. I do not recommend it. It is not a fix-all. It is a tool, okay? Sales enablement software will not fix your problem. Okay, implementing it correctly and measuring will fix your problem. So that's what I think about de-risking, right? It's saying, look, not only are you going to install this, it's going to cost you money, right? Because not only going to cost you money with us, it's going to cost you time. That's money as well. Okay, so how are you going to use that to get to a number that you go back and you say, hey, we spent this. Here's what we solved. This was the baseline. Here's where it is today. In this time frame, we're going to try to get it to here. Okay, and to me, that's an easy way to de-risk it. That phased approach is a great idea, but bringing in that vertical expert, critical, absolutely critical.
I've never heard that, by the way. I think that's an exceptional idea. And again, I feel your pain. Back in my other life, I was a program manager running a software group, and I had 9 people on my team. And I remember customers were always like, Victor, I know your product works, but the word that always kills a lot's a deal. But he says, how do we get all of that in there, and then how do we know they're going to use once you put it in there, right? And
exactly.
it's always that friction.
Bigtincan is the world's leading sales learning and enablement platform that delivers the onboarding and training, preparation, coaching, customer engagement, and follow-up and insights that modern businesses need to win.
I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned M&As and, the bringing together of 2 companies, Rusty. We're talking, now we're bringing together platforms and we're bringing together people. Give me the around the campfire, good ways of doing it, bad ways of doing it, and just walk us through an M&A process and what are some of the best practices.
So put this into perspective. How many M&A events have you been involved with personally?
Personally,
probably take a round guess.
24.
Okay, so let's say 24. Let's say that's average.
By the way, that's over a 3 to 5 year period. Okay, yeah.
So this is reality for all you salespeople out there in the world. You are going to experience M&A events. It is going to happen, right? The majority of companies do not IPO. The majority of companies get bought or they go out of business. Okay, so let's be fair. Okay, so very few companies are going to IPO. If you're so lucky to be a part of one, get your options package. You're awesome. Okay, now let's talk about M&A because to me it's near and dear to my heart because in the last 3 years I've been involved in 11 events. I've built a company and sold it to another company. I was the CEO and founder of that company. And I've been on the other side in purchasing companies here at Bigtincan. So now if I think about the individual seller, what I witnessed is a lot of confusion. Most people don't know this is coming. Right? You wake up one morning to an email from your CEO that says town hall. You pop onto the Zoom meeting nowadays and they're like, guess what? We just got bought. And an immediate thing to me that seems to happen is fear is, have I lost my job? Okay. So as being on the other side of this as many times as I have in recent years, I would encourage you to flip that. And I would encourage you to be curious, okay? And be curious and say, how could this be the moment that defines my next phase of my career? Okay, because now you have the chance just to wipe the slate clean, okay? So let's say you're on the side being acquired. So let's say you're in the middle of your sales team, you're doing great, but you're not quite in the top. Here's your chance to move to the top. So that's the way I would look at it. So how can I take this event as a way to move to the top of the heap, right? And what am I going to do? I'm going to go out there. I'm going to learn about the compelling buying events for this company that I just joined. I'm going to go talk to marketing and say, what kind of leads do you guys producing? I'm going to go talk to sellers and say, how good is marketing? And then learn the product. You have a moment here to have that change as an individual. Now, if you're a sales manager, so feed in there. So if you're an individual seller, what do you think, Victor? I'm curious.
No, I'm with you. I now know why you're in marketing, because you're like, no, let's not go negative, let's go positive. Because I have the same viewpoint, Rusty, which is like, well, wait a minute, if we're being bought out, I'll probably have more resources. They probably have a better infrastructure than we do, some better processes and systems. And just by the way, a side note to this is that they did a study on like top performers. And so if an insurance company, if a top performer left and went to another competitor, it took them 3 years to get back to where they were originally at. And what they realized based on this study, I thought that was shocking. What they found is that only 30% of the individual contribution was based on success. In other words, the reason that salesperson was successful was 30% of it was because of their sales skills. The other 70% had to do with systems, processes like marketing, sales process, CRM platforms, sales engagement platforms. And that taught me, when I saw that study, I was like, oh, so a lot of success has to do with more of the infrastructure. And you would know this best because you've built and sold companies.
Yeah, it totally does. So that kind of takes me to the next phase of M&A, which is if you're a manager, right? So let's say you're a sales manager and you manage a territory, right? 8, 10 people. You're going to be compared against the other manager in that territory, right? Unless you're so lucky to be bought in a situation where they're just buying new territories, right? That's a whole different game. So let's just take that situation, right? So now you're in a situation where you're going to go head to head with another sales manager for that territory. They're not keeping both of you. So now, again, how do I spin that back to the positive? How do I be curious? Hey, is the person I'm going up against successful? Right? I now got to think of a whole new world of sales, which is now I'm in a head-to-head battle with another sales manager. And again, I think it comes down to those systems and tools, right? So do you have the systems and tools in place at your current company, or are you about to get a set of systems and tools that you're going to have to quickly learn and get up to speed on, right? So let's say they had Bigtincan sitting there, right? I'll be a little cheesy here and do a little marketing. Let's say you got bought by a company and they had a sales enablement platform like Bigtincan. If you're a manager, the first thing I would do is learn that platform as fast as I can learn it. Because what's it going to give you? It's going to give you analytics. Okay. And if you can get analytics, you got data. And data doesn't lie. People do. Okay. So no matter what they're telling you over there on the other side of the M&A, the data will always tell you the truth.
You got to get a shirt. You got to get a shirt. Really data doesn't lie. People do.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite phrases.
That's funny.
But it's true of everything, right? It's true of marketing. It's true of sales. It's true of IT. Everything you deal with in business. Data doesn't lie. People do, right? And they're not lying on purpose. They might know the answer, okay? But the data will always tell you, right? So get the data from the marketing team. Get the data out of the sales enablement platform. Get the data out of CRM. Make that data your friend, because it's going to tell you the direction to go and to navigate when you get that M&A done.
Yeah,
those are some things I'm really obsessed about.
Yeah, I guess I've always viewed mergers and acquisition. I've never had a negative connotation or viewpoint, of them. I'm always like, if we're acquiring somebody, it's like, what else can I sell now? What are they bringing that I can now sell, right? I thought about, and then when we got acquired, I'm like, okay, what new territories or customers do I now have access to?
Yeah, that's the best part of it, right?
And so glass half full, half empty type of thing. But I want to wrap up with this because I know your time is valuable. I don't want to keep you on here too long. But I need to know, Rusty, it's a compelling question that I personally need to know the answer to. How does a guy with a biochemistry background, a PhD, get into marketing? What the heck happened? Dude, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
How do you explain this to people?
So people change careers. Let's just say it that way. So everybody's going to change. Most people change careers during their life. So I do have a PhD in biochemistry and molecular genetics. I spent about 12 years doing biochemical research. I worked on type 1 diabetes for the majority of that time. And I hit a point in academia where I decided I don't really want to be a professor. That's the bottom line. So I went to the private space. I went to work for a biotech company. As part of that job, I was chief scientific officer. And what I had to help them do was figure out how to rephrase and reframe their products to scientists. That got me thinking about how scientists, let's say they're medical practitioners, or let's say they're people working on diseases and those kind of things. I had the unique perspective of buying millions of dollars of product a year when I was in the laboratory. What I brought to that was an idea of how do you sell to scientists. So I actually created a blog that was called How to Sell to Scientists. And I wrote about the things that I had experienced buying millions of dollars worth of science equipment. And to be honest with you, my sales being on my buying experience was not that great. That's what compelled me to go write that blog. But at that point, I'll date myself a little bit. People would walk in with a giant catalog, literally paper, to my lab, and they would say, "Hey, what are you working on?" Hey, and they would literally look it up in a catalog and be like, "Yeah, we've got that. It's part number XYZ." 18 years later, I would get it shipped to the lab. Okay, so that was selling then. Now it's really fast, right? You look up on the internet, bam, I can order the product, right? But so my experience was not very good. So I said, look, there's a better way to do this. So what I tried to do was write and think from the perspective of a scientist buying things. That led me into sales and marketing. And I started a company with Mark Walker, who was at a company called Bigtincan, called Fat Stacks. And our entire reason to be was to take those giant catalogs and digitize them. So that was right about the time that this lovely device was released, the iPhone. And what we did was digitize paper catalogs and made them searchable on phones and iPads for salespeople. We grew that company, sold it to some of the biggest companies in the world. We had Corning, we had Thermo Fisher, salespeople using our tool. And we eventually sold that product to Bigtincan about 3 years ago. And then when I came over, they didn't know what to do with me, and they put me in marketing. And the next thing you know, I'm the CMO.
Great story, by the way. And by the way, I mean,
Yeah.
it's worth highlighting that, you were a buyer first. And then when you saw the bad sales habits, you're like, yeah, we got to change the game a little bit. But I like your phrase here, how to sell through science, man. I don't know. There's a book in there somewhere, Rusty. There's a book in there somewhere, how to sell through science.
My next thing, right?
one more thing. Oh, I didn't touch on this. I'm going to kick myself.
Yeah, go for it.
Rusty, talk about a little bit about the, and this is not self-promotion. I just want to give you context in case you don't know. So in 2018, I wrote a book called Sales Ex Machina, which is how AI is changing the world of selling. And this 4 years ago when I wrote the book. I'm a nerd just like you, man. I came from the engineering side, so I came up that way. And tell me what you're seeing now, because now things I was saying 4 years ago, I'm like, oh, I think it's even past what I've even stated. I also know you're connected to a guy named, I don't know if you know Justin Michael, who wrote Tech Powered Sales. Fantastic book, by the way. Also talks about AI and the different tech stacks. And I wanted to ask you, just get your opinion on, first of all, AI, how, Bigtincan is using AI, and then just your, predict, as a good AI algorithm would, where this is going.
Okay. So I'll start with the caveat that I do not predict the future any better than anybody else in the world, which is I have zero ability to predict the future. This is something I really love, though. I think let's just break this down one level. So machine learning is the step precursor to AI. And my personal belief is there is no AI currently on this planet. My guess is we're probably many years out. Okay, now what we do have is really good machine learning. And what machine learning needs is a giant data set. And you can teach it with a thing called an algorithm, which you just described, right? How to look through that data and find things that a human couldn't find. To me, that's the easiest way to think about machine learning or AI. So now, if that's what it does, I sit on top of this giant pool of data, crunch numbers based on some mathematical formula. I can now serve up insights to anyone based on a linear path. This is the most important thing that I've grasped lately is machine learning is linear. Okay, so it's not going to branch off and all of a sudden figure out how to do physics if it's learning about how people talk during sales calls, right? So Gong CI is never going to create physics, right?
Right.
But what it can do is
it's very narrow is what you're saying, right? Is that the same definition when you talk about
narrow band, right?
Okay,
so it's linear, but it's very fast linear, right? Okay, so once an AI is trained well, let's call it machine learning. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting the words mixed up a little bit there. Once it begins to learn and the algorithm gets better and better, it gets faster and faster at extrapolating that information. Okay, so now what could an individual seller, let's go back to the individual. I love talking to the individual sellers because I think it's the most fun. Okay, now as an individual seller, how could I utilize machine learning to be better at my job? Okay, the example you gave was earlier was conversational intelligence, CI. So we actually have our own AI here at Bigtincan. It's called Voice Vibes. It is trained very specifically to understand what vibe you are giving off to another human. That is the only thing that machine learning is trained on. So let's think about that for a second. Do you actually know how anybody perceives you?
I'm unaware. I don't know.
Yeah, you
There's
have
there's
no
times,
idea. You
by the way,
think
there's
you
times
know.
you do, but in many cases you don't really.
Right, because they could be going, man, this guy is bitsy. This
Yeah.
guy is arrogant,
Yeah.
right? And because everyone's perception of other people is different, it's completely set up by our backgrounds. It's set up by our education. It might be set up by the guy who got mad at me in the coffee stand this morning because I cut him, right? So now other people perceive you a certain way. So what this particular machine does is we trained it on thousands and thousands of hours of people speaking with voice coaches who truly understand your vibes. Okay. Now, all that machine does, it learns how to tell you your vibes. So you can actually use it to figure out how other people are perceiving you.
Okay.
Okay. What we learned, okay, is that if you are assertive, you're 30% more likely to close a deal than if you're anything else. But you're also more likely to close if you're arrogant, which I think is very interesting. So if you come across as ditzy or shy, if you come across as uninformed, if you come across as confused, it's better to be arrogant, which I think is very interesting, right? So what we've done is now we're training this thing on massive sales teams, right? So we've got people in call centers with 50,000 people. This piece of CI is listening in on those calls and it's saying, hey, Victor, right there, you sounded a little ditzy. And you go, okay, I need to improve that. So now you can go practice against that machine during your practice time, something I know that you're big on, right? Everybody should shoot layups. Okay, just go shoot layups. Use the machine to go shoot layups. It's learned from thousands and thousands of hours about the way people perceive you and figure out what vibe you want to give off and then figure out which vibes help you sell more.
That's
So
interesting.
that's a great use of machine learning, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so it's a
really
really different way to think about it as an individual seller, right? So your company might have bought these kind of things, and maybe your boss is using it to listen in on your calls, right? So the thing I've heard pushback from individual people is like, oh, those are people listening in on me, or they're trying to spy on me. And so maybe now, if you were curious and you said, okay, how can I use this to my advantage? So now we're talking about machine learning, we're talking about AI. You asked me where I think it's going. So now let's say you combined a couple of these things up, right? You got something like Voice Vibes, you got something like Gong doing CI, you got other intelligence working inside your CRM system saying, hey, every time someone shows page 3 of PowerPoint XYZ, we close the deal 5 days faster. Okay, so now once those things combine, now you've really got this huge additive power that individual sellers, managers, and even entire companies can now take advantage of to actually predict the outcome. And it'll come back to something we talked about in the very beginning. So where I think AI and machine learning is going to be really interesting over the long haul is creating an amazing buying experience. And I told you I was completely obsessed with this in the beginning, right? So right now, if you don't know how you're perceived, you don't know what kind of buying experience your buyer's having. If you don't know what your buyer wants to see, video, PowerPoint, AR, VR, doesn't matter, they're not having a great buying experience. But if a machine could predict that for you, and let's say you walked in, you're ready to go, you knew how they wanted to be perceived, you knew what materials to bring, how much better would you be at your job?
Yeah, much.
So that's where I think it's going.
So, God, I know I said I was going to end this podcast, but dude, you just keep
No, keep going.
keep
It's fine.
peeking things, and I'm just like, okay, more about that. So on the buy, so
We can do this again.
So first of all, I never thought about. I have to be like really honest here. I never thought about. I knew about sentiment analysis, and when I think about your voice vibes, I never thought about using it as a mirror on my own voice. Never thought about that. I always thought about analyzing the customer's voice only. Right? Because different platforms, we talk about different things, but like combining talk time, interruptions and all that. But I never thought about just me talking, recording myself, and then, figuring out what vibe I give off. I think the 30% assertive and arrogant, it kind of makes sense if you look at the data from like the Challenger sale or, again, Matt Dixon's new book. It really lines up. I think maybe arrogance maybe is perceived as confidence.
Probably. Yeah. Confidence is actually one of the highest
Yeah,
indicators of bias.
maybe
Yeah.
arrogance
100%.
sounds, it's a more
Yeah.
pejorative, you know, like, oh, that's a little, but so the, on the buyer experience, you know, and again, you say you'll get to know like how they want to be sold to, right? So give me an example of, you know, hey, Victor, you know, here's our Big Tin Can platform, right? Here's a perfect example of how we had to switch how we interacted with our customer because he knew he wanted to interact differently. Just some simple examples. I'm sure you have a bunch of those.
Actual switching what Bigtincan did for a customer.
Yeah, in other words, I've identified, I'm a frontline salesperson using the Big Tin Can platform. The machine learning is telling me this person really likes to be dealt this way. They want to be dealt with this way. Or, you know what I mean? They want that buying experience. They're different. Okay, so I'm able as a salesperson to kind of do task switching or buyer experience switching. That makes any sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So classic example of that is part of this. You know, this is true of almost most sales enablement platforms, right? So I want to be not too pitchy here. A very good sales enablement platform should have buyer analytics. So it should give you the ability to, let's take a classic place. So you're the type of seller who goes out, we have a conversation, and I'm going to send you something, right? So whether that's I send it to you an email, let's say it's a PowerPoint, that copy of my deck, or it's a PDF one pager, right? I'm going to send that to you. Okay. I might put it in a digital sales room. It's kind of new idea that we got this collaboration space up here. We're going to work in, Mr. Buyer. But I somehow get this to you, right? This is a classic sales thing. We all do it. Send me something, right? So how do you know what they want, how they want to be interacted with? Okay. Are they opening your email or did they want to get it by text? Okay. So, or what page of that PowerPoint did they obsess on? Okay. So now the machine will tell you, all right, Victor, you sent this PowerPoint to Rusty 2 weeks ago. He's looked at page 3 52 times. Okay, so either his kid is clicking on the button on his iPhone, you know, having fun, or there's something going on page 3, okay? And he's doing it on his iPhone, okay? Because the analytics will tell you the device, right? You have to opt it in. I want to be cautious here. Doesn't work in Europe. So now what do I know, right? I know, 1, he reacted to my email. Okay, 2, something on page 3 is extremely compelling. And number, you know, and how do I go back now and use the information, this piping, right? This will come up as a notification right on your phone. Victor looked at page 3. Okay, so what do I need to do? I need to go find out what's on there. What is that behavior is doing? What are they doing? Are they just looking at it, or are they forwarding it around the company? Right? Are now there are multiple people looking at page 3? So it's just all those types of things is what the machines is going to tell you, right? So you would have no way of knowing that before. So you could absolutely flip things on the head. We saw this during COVID quite a bit, right? Because sellers no longer had the ability there for a little while to go meet in person. So you had to find all these interesting ways to understand how buyers were experiencing your stuff. So without a sales enablement tool, you're just firing it blind.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's probably the classic thing I can think of, like off the top of my head. Now, I think these systems are going to get better and better. This is one of the things, we're coming back to this AI topic for just a second. I know we're probably way over time, but it doesn't matter.
Keep going.
So
Keep
one of
going.
the
I'm
ways
loving
I
this.
think
Keep
about
going.
this, right? So again, we talked about machine learning. In order to make a machine learn, you have to have this giant data set, okay? So you might need 5 years of sales data in order for the machine to begin to extrapolate good information. Okay, so let's say a customer's been on Bigtincan platform for 5 to 6 years. They're collecting data on sales coaching, sales onboarding, sales training. They're collecting data on what's being sent out in the field. They're collecting buyer analytics. They marry that up to the data that's in their CRM. What do they have? They have a digital advantage. Okay, they have a digital advantage because those two data sets can talk to each other with the same machine learning on top of it. Okay, so for any company that is not thinking about this, this is your warning shot. The biggest companies in this world have been collecting this data and understand already how to manipulate it. Okay, they are taking off on a linear path with an escape velocity that you can never catch because their machines are going to learn faster than yours. Okay, this is critical, right? So if you haven't thought about this as a CEO, as a seller, as a VP of sales, you got to get your head wrapped around this because data is going to eat you alive.
You know, and I love what you know, because this is what we talk about. We talk about Amazon, right? They have so much data there, as you say, they're, you know, escape velocities. Well, they've gone already. They're on their way to Mars already.
Yeah, they've gone.
And
no, they're gone.
So that right there is an exceptional point. I have this one. I love your opinion on this one. Is that I don't think enough companies look at the data as an asset, much like I would look at property or building or capital,
Mhm.
right? What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
100%. So the future, if you look at several, let's just look into the near future a little bit, right? We've seen Meta come out. We've seen AR, VR. We have seen things like Web3. If you're not familiar with it, go Google it. Get on it right now. It's going to be a huge part of our lives here very soon. It's all data. So the data, that Amazon's data is probably more valuable to them than them selling their products to you. Uber's data is way more valuable to them than them driving you around and you paying them for it, right? Because what are they using that for? They're using it for the future, right? They're taking that data and they're going, how are we going to create better buying experiences, better and better and better and better and better, okay? And that data is the most critical thing in their world, right? So now, if I just say I'm a normal old sales organization and I sell insurance, something you mentioned earlier, right? And let's say you got 500 sellers and maybe 1,000 distributors, not distributors, what are they called?
Agents. I don't know. Yeah.
Agents, insurance agents. Sorry about that. Now you've got a pretty small data set, right? So it's going to take you a long time to build up enough unique data, but there's plenty of public data out there that you can go buy. Okay. Now you ask me why the data is valuable, right? Because I can now sell my data to other vendors who can now marry that up and teach machines on it. So the data becomes the product
Yeah. Do you ever sell that as a selling
in the
point, by the
future.
way, when you sell the Bigtincan
Um,
platform, or is that something you just kind of only touch on
I will say
gently?
this: the way that I think about it is this: the top 10% of high performing companies that are using sales enablement, sales training, sales coaching, sales readiness to its maximum efficiency, they're obsessed with
Mm.
data. I'll just they're it's part of their company cultures. They talk about it all the time. They dream about it. They think about it. They've hired data scientists already. Okay, now let's say you're in that next 60% who like wants to be in that 10%. So that's where we're highly encouraging them to start programs immediately to just training their employees on data. Like we just had a pretty relatively minor, shallow conversation about machine learning, right? But even that amount of knowledge is probably not sitting in the majority of your people's
Correct.
heads. So simply training them about why the data is important is really important for that next 60% of companies, which I think are like on their way to being top performers with sales enablement and using it as the actual way it should be used. And the bottom 40, I mean, they're just happy to get PDFs out of SharePoint. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's fine too. It's totally fine.
Right. I was going to say, so
Totally
when
fine.
you look
If you,
when you look at the Bigtincan platform, there's the what is it, the learning module, the engagement module, and the content module.
yep,
And
exactly.
so I want you, so there's learning. I can train the frontline salespeople. Engagement. Here are the tools I use to connect with clients. The content. Here's the stuff, the
Yep.
assets you're going to need to sell them, presentations, whatever it may be. Now
Mm-hmm.
we have, so
Mm-hmm.
you have all this data sitting there, right? Now I want you to tie it to one last point. I swear this will be my last one. You said
It's
you,
all
you
good.
said you were doing something with VR. Like, how does this all
Uh-huh.
play together? Like I'm still having a hard time with the meta thing. I got to be honest. I'm just like I'm trying to wrap my brain
Okay.
around, how real is it? Look, 20, 30 years ago, they talked about expert systems and AI, and then it went through 20 years of a nuclear winter before we had enough data processing power, so forth and so on. So I keep hearing
Mm-hmm.
VR, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I think there's another 20 years off. But then you see Zuckerberg go meta, and you're like, well, why would he do that? So what's your
Yeah.
perspective on VR and maybe how it ties to your platform? What are you guys doing?
Okay. So my personal perspective on it is it's coming faster than you think it
Okay.
is. People as smart as Mark Zuckerberg and the people that back him and he can surround himself with would not allow them to make this bet if they did not believe that this was real. So that's my personal take on it, right? So what are we doing? Bigtincan is very innovative. So we did buy a company last year who specializes in XR, which is a combination of augmented reality, virtual reality, and sorry, one other reality. Doesn't matter. We'll use those two, right? Augmented reality is very simple. I want to sell you this coffee cup. I hold up my phone. The phone shoots the coffee cup, recognizes it, and tells me the features of it. I can share a video with you right here
Hmm.
on my phone, okay? Because it recognizes that object. It's going to put something there and augment the reality of this cup, okay? We are selling this quite often. It is in the field right now. You can walk into stores, I can't name their names, and you can see this technology being used today, 100%. We are beginning to sell virtual reality. Imagine you sell cranes.
Okay.
How are you going to put a train in your trunk and drive it over there, right? You're not, okay? But I can easily put you a virtual reality headset on, and I can show you how that crane works. I can show you how it functions. I can take it apart. I can set you in it. I can show you the height of it. I can show you the width of it. Okay, that is happening today. The best companies in the world are already doing it.
Right.
It is 100% happening. We're already selling it. We actually offer software to not only do this, but companies can build it themselves with drag and drop.
Wow, that's amazing. I'd have to.
Just like
That's
a website.
amazing. How would you use it with the?
Just like a
How
website.
would you use it with when you're training? Are there any plans to use it training frontline salespeople?
All the time. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the main things you're going to do. Let's say you have a simplest case. Let's say you sell, I don't know, toilets, right? And you're American Standard, not a customer. It doesn't matter. I just have to see it over here. And you're bringing in distributors from Lowe's and Home Depot all over the world, and they're like, how do I sell this new awesome toilet, right? I mean, the way to think about it now, the way they're training those people is they're just handing them a device, and they're walking over to the machine, and it's a person's popping up, and they're saying, hey, let's learn about this toilet. How do you sell it? What are the value props? Boom, 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 boom. That's already happened, right? So now, how do you extrapolate that? So the way we're extrapolating that is companies like Matterport, who you may have heard of, publicly traded company. They're very big in Meta and AR and those kind of things. They actually have technology which they can come in with cameras and create that virtual space and recreate it in virtual. So they can literally walk into a room, shoot it with cameras. Now it's a virtual space. Now I don't have to fly people all over the world to my training center, right? They just put on their headset and they get trained on all their products.
That's amazing.
And they could do it anytime in their own time, right? So think of the dollar. We'll go back to dollar save, something in time, right? So first of all, time. I'm to fly people over here and do stuff, okay? Time and then dollars. It costs a lot of money to fly people to training centers. Companies spend millions of dollars on this. So this is all happening right now. We have people doing sales kickoffs in virtual space now, literally completely in virtual.
No, I trust me, I know. Rusty, how do you, as a chief marketing officer, for this company that keeps acquiring other companies, because I know you also acquired one of my favorite, Brain Sharks. Love the brand, by the way. Love the brand.
Love Brain Sharks.
And
absolutely.
So you're the chief marketing officer, and it seems like you got to herd the company cats, right? And move them in a certain direction. Close us out with, how does Rusty do it, man? How does Rusty try to put his arm around all this stuff and then say, all right, here's the go-to-market plan?
I'll just come back to what I told you. We're obsessed with the buying experience. So, we're going to take that lens and go and look at everything. So the reason we buy companies is innovation, right? So we're trying to get ahead of the market, and we're buying things it's faster for us to buy them than code them. That's just the reality, right? So that's true of almost all software companies, right? Salesforce, I think they average 9 companies a year, and they're buying innovation, right? So, and that's the lens I, as a marketer, I'm going to look at that through. So how does this fit with our vision of creating an amazing buying experience for buyers? Okay. And then how do I take these tools that this company has? Let's say it's their products like a Brain Shark, right? Amazing product, it's been around for 12 years. What makes it great is it's really easy to create sales content. That's it. That's what makes it great, right? I can upload a PowerPoint and I can talk over it and I can send it to somebody. It's the simplest tool you can imagine, right? But that's an amazing thing to create a buying experience, because now everybody in your company is a SME, right? A subject matter expert. You don't have to go to the awesome sales training center to create your courses. Anybody can upload a PowerPoint, talk over it, branch learning, upload it to the system. You're good to go, right? So now so if I put my lens on it, what does that do for my customers and my customers' customers? If we can help anybody in your company train you faster to get up to speed, you're going to create a better buying experience for your customer. So that's my lens. So anything we do, I'm looking at their systems, I'm looking at their people, and I'm looking at their marketing, and I'm looking at their products. I'm saying, how is this going to translate to helping our customers create a great buying experience?
Holy bucks. You know what I want you to do, Rusty? Take the following words and show this to your CEO. You need to pay this man more money. I don't know what he's making, but give him more money, because that was a lot. And then, by the way, what you said was kind of an outline of what you do. The execution of that and the completion of that has to be just tough. Rusty.
It's months. I'll tell you, it's months.
Yeah, I think a little more. Yeah, months is being very conservative, I'm sure. Rusty, where can they find out more about you, my friend?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Rusty Bishop, J Rusty Bishop on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter at J Rusty Bishop. And those are the two best places to get me.
All right. And also, go check out the Bigtincan website at bigtincan.com. And that is it for the Sales Influence Podcast. Leave me some feedback on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you're hearing or listening. Then check out the Bigtincan website. And after you do that, go to salesvelocityacademy.com. Check out the new courses there. And on that note, this is Victor Antonio, always reminding you that selling ain't hard when you have Bigtincan and you know how to use it. Bye. And we're done.
Bigtincan is the world's leading sales learning and enablement platform that delivers the onboarding and training, preparation, coaching, customer engagement, and follow-up and insights that modern businesses need to win.